Welcome to Under Baobab Skies. Before the tourists and textbooks, before the word ruins, there was breath. Great Zimbabwe was not just walls of stone, it was rhythm, labor, and faith. In the quiet hills, where the Shash and Rund rivers meet, 1,000 hammers struck the heartbeat of an empire. The kings were spoken of in drums. The miners were spoken of in whispers. They came from surrounding chiefdoms, young men with ribs like bows, eyes shining with hunger and pride. They called the mountain Mother of Gold. She was generous but cruel. Each day she asked for skin, bone, and breath, and gave back glitter that was never theirs. Their lives began before sunrise, their names erased before sunset. In the tunnels, air moved like an old song, slow, uncertain. They dug narrow veins with stone picks, each swing guided by stories of ancestors who once mined the same hills. Some believed the earth was alive, that each strike hurt her body. So they whispered apologies with every blow. They were paid not in gold, but in grain, salt, and sometimes nothing. Still, they labored, because work was not only survival, it was belonging. To refuse to dig was to break faith with your lineage. The miners learned the mountain's moods when her belly trembled, when her dust turned black. One wrong sound and she would collapse, swallowing everything, sealing the story before it could be told. They told each other tales to stay awake. One such tale was of Tendakai, a miner who claimed he could talk to the stones. He said the echoes in the tunnels were voices of the old ones, the first miners who never left. He would stop mid-strike, tilt his head, and whisper back. Others mocked him, until the day the tunnel shook and the wall cracked open to reveal a vein of pure gold, bright enough to light the dark like dawn. From that day, no one mocked Tendakai again, but the mountain remembered. A week later, the roof gave way. Tendakai vanished under rock and silence. The men said the earth had reclaimed her listener. Above ground, life continued. The king's messengers collected tribute. Gold was traded for ivory, beads, and Persian cloth. The city shone, and no one asked whose lungs built its glow. Centuries later, archaeologists came digging again, but with cleaner hands. They called it excavation. The miners' tools, bones, and bowls surfaced like quiet confessions. But some things remain unmeasurable. No one can weigh exhaustion. No one can catalogue a dream unfinished. So, when the wind moves through the stone corridors today, listen closely. You might hear the song of those miners, the ones who never got to rest. Their work was not just survival. It was a form of remembering, building a body of stone to keep their names from dust, and in that, perhaps, they succeeded. Their breath still clings to the walls. Their silence still hums in the wind. Gold it glows like trapped sunlight. For the people of Great Zimbabwe, it was more than just a shimmering metal, more than just wealth. It was the very embodiment of power, a potent medicine, and music forged into solid form. The kings and priests who ruled this sprawling city of stone understood its language. It spoke of divinity, of authority that reached beyond the mortal realm. To control the gold was to control the narrative of an entire civilization. But who brought this precious metal from the earth's dark heart into the dazzling light of day? The miners were chosen young. Their destinies decided almost at birth. Before they could even dream of descending into the mountain's veins, they were initiated into a world of ritual and reverence. They were taught the rites, the sacred protocols that governed the relationship between man and mountain. Prayers were whispered into the handles of their tools, turning simple iron and wood into conduits of spiritual power. Charms, woven from sinew and blessed herbs, were tied securely around their wrists, not just for luck, but as a shield, because gold was dangerous. It was a seductive force. Yes, it fed the insatiable greed of men, but it also fed the spirits that slumbered deep within the rock. Imagine this, a line of young men, walking barefoot as the first rays of dawn paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Their faces are serious, their steps deliberate. An elder, his own face a roadmap of time and wisdom, dips his fingers into a bowl of cool ash. One by one, he draws ancient symbols on their foreheads, a mark of protection, a sign of their solemn duty. To swing a pick without this blessing was unthinkable. It was to invite the mountain's anger, to court disaster. And so, for these chosen few, every strike of the pick against the unyielding quartz was an act split in two. Half work, half worship, each swing was a prayer, each shard of rock a response from the earth. They weren't just digging for treasure. They were in a constant, delicate dialogue with the very soul of the land. The sound of their work echoed through the valleys not as the clang of industry, but as the rhythm of a sacred ceremony, a testament to the intricate dance of belief and survival beneath the African sun. The world above was one of vast skies and sun-drenched granite, but the world below was a different reality entirely. The tunnels were claustrophobic, constricting passages that snaked deep into the earth. They were often no taller than a man's shoulders, forcing the miners to crawl on their hands and knees for hours on end. The air was thick with dust, each breath a gritty reminder of their subterranean prison. To keep the encroaching darkness and the chilling fear at bay, they sang. Their voices, low and guttural, would weave through the narrow shafts, a somber harmony against the rhythmic scrape of their tools. It was more than just a distraction. It was a belief. They sang to appease the spirits of past miners, the ghosts they believed still lingered in the stale air, guiding the flow of oxygen and warning of unstable ground. When the flickering light of their torches suddenly dimmed and danced, they wouldn't blame a simple draft. They'd whisper that a ghost had just passed by, a silent guardian from another time. Among these men, one became a legend, a figure of both awe and fear. His name was Mudiwa. He was known as the Gold Eater. It wasn't a title of honor. It was a description of his strange, compulsive habit. Each time his pick struck a new, glittering vein of gold, he would perform a private ritual. He'd carefully gather the shimmering dust on his fingertip and rub it onto his tongue, tasting the metal as if it were a spice. He claimed it wasn't madness. He said the taste connected him to the ancestors, that it allowed him to hear their whispers, guiding him to the richest deposits. He believed he was communing with the very source of the gold's power. But this strange communion came at a terrible price. Over time, a change came over Mudiwa. His eyes, once bright and alert, grew strange. They were always half-closed, filmed over with a dreamy, distant look, as if he were perpetually caught between the world of the living and the world of spirits. The other miners began to keep their distance, their whispers following him like shadows. They said the gold was not just speaking to him, but consuming him. They believed it was eating him from the inside out, turning his spirit into something as cold and hard as the metal he so coveted. Then came the night the mountain finally spoke back. It wasn't with a whisper, but with a roar. A deep, bone-jarring tremor shook the tunnels, followed by a thunderous crack that echoed like the sky splitting open. Then, a horrifying rush of earth and rock, a suffocating wave of darkness that swallowed everything in its path. Panic and chaos erupted as miners scrambled for the surface, choking on the dust, their torches extinguished by the violent surge of air. When the dust finally settled and a grim dawn broke over the devastation, the survivors began the heart-wrenching task of searching for the lost. They dug for days, their hope dwindling with every handful of soil. Of Madiwa, the Gold Eater, they found no trace. All that remained, lying glinting in the pale morning light, was his bracelet, the simple leather band engraved with a single poignant word, Ndangariro. In their language, it meant memory. It was all that was left of the man who tried to taste eternity. Above ground, life in Great Zimbabwe continued its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the tragedy buried beneath. Traders from distant lands, their caravans laden with cloth and beads, waited impatiently for the next delivery of the precious metal. In the city's grand enclosure, the drums beat louder, their vibrant pulse a celebration of power and prosperity, a sound that easily drowned out the silent screams of the miners' absence. The gold continued to flow, albeit slower. It was melted down, beaten, and shaped into exquisite jewelry and sacred objects. It gleamed in the temples, adorned the necks of royalty, and paid for the city's grand ambitions. But for those who knew its true cost, its beautiful music now rang hollow, a melody haunted by the ghosts of the men who had paid for it with their very lives. Today, centuries later, that very same gold rests under the soft, sterile lights of a museum display. Tourists from around the world lean in close, their faces reflected in the polished surfaces. They see exquisite artistry, the genius of a lost civilization. They admire the intricate patterns, the timeless beauty. They see history, they see wealth. What they don't see is the agony. They don't hear the whispered prayers in the dark, feel the choking dust, or comprehend the terror of a tunnel collapsing. But somewhere, deep under the silent stones of Great Zimbabwe, the mountain remembers. Its dark, earthen heart holds the memory of every life it claimed. As hands brush over the cool glass of the display cases, they are unknowingly tracing the outlines of a story written in sweat and sacrifice. A simple dissolve from these polished ornaments to the dark, empty maw of a cave entrance reminds us that every artifact has two histories, the one that is celebrated and the one that is buried. The miners of Great Zimbabwe, the men like Mudwa, did not live to see the glory their labor created. They never stood atop the high stone walls to watch the sunset over their kingdom. Their names are not carved into the granite towers. They were the invisible foundation upon which an empire was built. Yet, through their toil, through their faith and their fear, they forged a legacy that still stands, a testament to human resilience that has weathered the centuries. Their story is a silent hymn, a powerful melody carved not in gold but in the very granite of the earth. Their forgotten lives teach us a profound and enduring lesson. They teach us that wealth without memory is just emptiness. That every shimmer of fortune, every gleam of success, hides a shadow. It reminds us to look beyond the surface, to ask who paid the price for the beauty we admire. And even now, if you stand among those sacred walls as the sun sets and the African sky bleeds into twilight, they say the air still tastes faintly of dust, faintly of gold. A final, lingering memory of the gold eaters. At the very edge of Great Zimbabwe, where ancient stones glow red in the failing light of dusk, a young boy named Tapiwa watched his father. This was a familiar ritual, a quiet ceremony before the descent. His father, a miner, a man shaped by stone and shadow, was preparing for another journey into the earth. He took a worn leather strap and tied it firmly around his wrist. As he knotted it, his lips moved, whispering a name. It wasn't his own, nor was it a prayer to a distant god. It was the name of his own father and his father's father before him. For the men who worked the mines beneath this great kingdom, ancestry was their only armor, a shield forged from memory against the crushing weight of the mountain. They sat together by a small, crackling fire, Smoke curled upwards, a grey ribbon dancing against the immense, silent stone walls of the city. The twilight air was cool, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the dry earth. The father's face, etched with lines that told stories of both hardship and love, was illuminated by the flickering flames. He looked at his son, his eyes deep and serious. "Remember," he said, his voice low and steady, a sound that seemed to rise from the very ground they sat on. "The mountain has moods. She has a spirit of her own. Never speak her name in anger, and never take more than she is willing to give." Then, with a final, knowing glance at Tapiwa, he turned and walked toward a dark opening in the earth. He didn't look back. He simply disappeared, swallowed by the shadow. For the days and weeks that followed, Tapiwa's life was a study in patience. His world revolved around the mouth of that tunnel, a dark scar on the landscape. He became a familiar sight, a small, determined figure carrying water gourds to the other miners as they emerged, their faces caked with dust, their bodies weary. He would sit quietly, his ears open, absorbing their stories. He learned a new language, the language of the deep earth. The miners spoke of how the tunnels sighed at night, a long, mournful breath exhaled from the stone. They described how the rocks themselves seemed to weep, glistening with moisture when a pickaxe struck too deep, a sign of the mountain's pain. From these men, these quiet heroes of the underground, Tapiwa learned a profound truth about courage. It wasn't the loud, boastful cry of a warrior. It was something far more subtle, more resilient. Courage was the sound of men breathing evenly in the suffocating darkness, a shared rhythm of life in a place that constantly threatened it. It was the trust they placed in each other, a bond stronger than the rock they chipped away at. Then, one morning, the rhythm was broken. The sun rose as it always did, casting long shadows from the baobab trees. But the air was different, heavy with a silence that felt wrong. The miners emerged from the darkness, their usual camaraderie replaced by a somber, hollow-eyed grief. They came back without his father. The ground had shifted, they explained in hushed, broken tones. A section of the tunnel had collapsed. It had sealed. The mountain had claimed him. The words were spoken, but Tapiwa refused to let them take root in his heart. He refused to believe his father was simply gone. Logic and reason were swept away by a tide of desperate hope. Every day, he returned to the site of the collapse. The other miners had marked it as a grave, a place to be avoided, a place of sorrow. But for Tapiwa, it was a place of listening. He would lie down, pressing his small ear flat against the sun-warmed earth, closing his eyes, and willing the world to go silent. He was listening for a specific sound, a faint, slow, steady rhythm, the sound his father had once described to him, a smile playing on his lips, as the heartbeat of the mountain. It was the pulse of the earth itself, a deep, resonant hum that promised that life, in some form, continued. And so he listened, day after day, for the heartbeat, for a sign, for his father. The seasons turned. The rains came and washed the dust from the stones, and the sun returned to bake the earth once more. Tapiwa grew from a boy into a young man. The sharp edges of his grief softened, not disappearing, but transforming into a quiet strength, a solemn purpose. The path was laid out before him, as it had been for his father. He, too, became a miner. His hands, once soft, grew calloused. His shoulders broadened, learning to bear the weight of both the tools of his trade and the legacy he carried. He learned the tunnels, their twists and turns, their secrets and their dangers. He moved through the darkness with a familiar ease, the close air a strange comfort. And one day, guided by a mixture of memory and intuition, he felt drawn to an older, abandoned section of the mine. It was a place others feared, a network of tunnels that had long been deemed unstable. The elders warned against it, speaking of bad air and restless spirits. But Tapiwa wasn't afraid. He felt a pull, a sense that something was waiting for him. He dug where others would not. He moved with a careful, deliberate pace, listening to the whispers of the rock, respecting the mountain as his father had taught him. And then, his pickaxe struck something that wasn't stone. He cleared the rubble away carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. There, in a small, hollow chamber, a pocket of space preserved against the collapse, he found it. A small carving, whittled from a piece of dark wood. It was the figure of a man, simple and rough-hewn, holding a tiny torch aloft. In that instant, Tapiwa understood. His father had not vanished in a moment of terror and chaos. He had found a space, used his final moments not in panic, but in creation. He had become a guardian, a light-bearer within the stone. He had become part of the mountain. A profound peace settled over Tapiwa. He gently picked up the wooden figure, feeling the smooth, worn texture under his fingertips. This was his father's final message. A testament to a spirit that could not be crushed. After a long moment, he carefully placed the carving back where he had found it, nestled in its rocky alcove. Some things are not meant to be taken. They are meant to be witnessed, to be honored, and to be left in their sacred space. This was not a treasure to be possessed, but a story to be remembered. He made his way back to the surface, emerging from the dark mouth of the tunnel and blinking into the brilliant light of a new day. He walked to the edge of the escarpment and looked out over the magnificent city. The sun was rising, bathing the ancient walls of Great Zimbabwe in a warm, golden light. The city stood tall, majestic, eternal. A kingdom built of gold and stone, held up by the sweat and sacrifice of countless hands. Hands like his father's. Hands the world had never learned to name. Looking at that monumental legacy, a quiet promise took shape in his heart. The kingdom would stand, the gold would shine, but he would remember the true foundation. He would remember the silent strength, the quiet courage, the names whispered in the dark. And as the morning breeze stirred the air, he spoke his own words. A soft prayer sent out to the horizon, to the mountain, and to the man who rested within it. For those who fed the mountain, he whispered, "May your names outlast the dust. You are under baobab skies." The story of Tapiwa and his father is one of many that echo through the history of this incredible place. It's a story about legacy, sacrifice, and the unseen foundations upon which great civilizations are built. If their story has moved you, we invite you to explore the full narrative. We've created a comprehensive documentary that delves deeper into the lives, the culture, and the spirit of the people of Great Zimbabwe. You can watch the full film right here on our channel. Thank you for joining us. Please follow and subscribe for more stories from under the baobab skies.